G'day Bomber fans, it's been a fortnight since my last VFL recap, so it's time for another one. In these videos I just go over the AFL listed players, going through the reserves, talk about how they're doing, whether they're close or not to playing in the seniors. And now there was only one game from this period, so less to talk about, but we did also notch up our first win of the season, beating Collingwood in a thrilling game. There were some standout performances, and then we had a bye more recently to give the boys a rest. So let's get into the fortnightly VFL recap, and to stay up to date with these videos, make sure you subscribe, because we are set to be getting a handful of players back in the next week or two, so it's exciting for us and our depth. Let's get into it. Elijah Tsatas was brilliant against Collingwood. He was absolutely everywhere. He had 40 disposals. His contested work was unreal, and the great thing about this game was that we saw him not just win the ball, but do some damage with it when he won it. It was the most influential I've ever seen him play across any level. He was just everywhere. He needs to set this as his benchmark, or at least close to it every week, because we simply can't keep him out of the AFL side if he keeps playing like this. The only issue for Tsatas was that we had a bye the following week, so he couldn't continue that good form into another game. I hope the weekend's rest will come good for him and give him another level to go to after the break. I still don't know if he's in our best 22 right now. I think his game isn't holding up as well in the AFL. Still very young, but if he keeps playing like this, I'll definitely change my mind, and so too will the coaches, I reckon. Shiel had a big knock to the schnoz early in the game, which kept him off for a little while. It's never fun playing in the reserves, getting a busted nose, having to come on in the cold and play through it, but to his credit, he came back on to play through the pain and had a big say on how the game went. He had 24 disposals, kicked a nice goal as well, 5 clearances. His stoppage work was yet again really impressive and just better than anyone else's on the ground, and his composure late in the game was much needed. I think he's ready to come back, I'd say. I'd like to see him play as the sub or something, because he's been showing his class in the VFL in moments that you would just love to have in the AFL. I also think the week's rest would be nothing but good for him after those full match minutes with big body knocks as well. He hasn't had it easy in the VFL. He's had to come back after a long injury and had a brutal run of it, but it's good to see him back. I hope he is soon playing AFL footy, because at his best he's an important player and it's hard to say otherwise. Weideman is back in defence as a regular and looking really solid. His move back there has coincided with our good form as a team, because it's opening up room for Lewis Hayes to play with more freedom, although it felt like Weideman was the one pushing higher up the field more in the Collingwood game. Now, he didn't set the world alight like he did in other weeks. He was a monster a couple of weeks back for us, but he was really solid against the Pies, especially late in the game. You felt his experience down back, even though he's still quite new to this role. I think his days are probably still numbered for Essendon. He's showing plenty to like as a depth option back there for now, if we ever needed him to come back in. He was actually listed as an emergency for the Eagles game, ahead of Caddy and other youngsters, in fact, ahead of Lewis Hayes as well. And right now, that is probably... it's going to upset some people, but I can see why that is. He's a bigger body, he's experienced, he's playing well. I like them both together in the reserves, Hayes and Weideman. They're forming a nice little connection with each other. Speaking of Lewis Hayes, he was again really good against Collingwood. He was more defensively accountable this week. He didn't have his usual intercepting impact or lots of the ball, but he was still one of our better players. He's just really reliable, and he's becoming a really reliable player. It's great to have Mackay in the AFL and Hayes in the VFL, reliable defenders that you don't feel worried about when seeing the ball come their way. He was pushed pretty deep at times in this Collingwood game, so he was made to work more. I wonder if the Pies intentionally did this after seeing how good he was in previous weeks when higher up the field. I always felt like his opponent was dragging him back towards the Collingwood goals more, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. He's genuinely becoming an important player for our reserves team. He's not just promising anymore, he's having an impact, which is great. He's been our best player so far to start the year, I'd say. That's of the AFL listed VFL players. Bryan was probably best on ground in my eyes. It's him or Tsatas. I thought he absolutely killed the Collingwood rucks. They had absolutely no chance. I said in a video or two ago that we needed to start seeing Bryan impact the game outside of the ruck, using his class around the ground to get involved more, and we saw that against Collingwood and then some. He worked super hard and got rewarded by gathering plenty of the ball, and as always, he does nice things with it. He's a very good user for his size. You don't cringe like you do when Draper has ball in hand. He had 20 disposals, a couple of behinds, 4 clearances for himself, 5 marks, and 37 hitouts. To put that into perspective, Collingwood had 13 as a team, so he was the most damaging player out on the ground, I'd say. He really punished them for their lack of ruck depth. The only issue is he's just not getting any love for his good work. I'd say he should keep this up, but I doubt even consistent form like this will get him a game in the AFL. Caddy, he's had smaller disposal tallies than this year, but I would say this was probably his quietest of the season so far, quietest game of the season. He just never really got a look in. The forward line felt really cluttered. Whether or not we need to address that and slim it down, who knows. close. I guess it got the win for the team, but a player like Caddy who probably needs space to be at his best. It hasn't helped him, this new forward line. Although I think it's a good new challenge for Caddy anyway, trying to play himself into form in a tougher role than he'd usually be playing. He had 9 disposals, 1 behind. If I remember correctly, there were 2 missed chances for him. It just wasn't a very good game. His worst so far, but I think he will bounce back. I'm already seeing people quite critical of our decision to draft him, which is wild after less than 10 games. The club warned us that it would take time. I think we will see him back playing good, hard attacking footy soon again. Luamon Lual was a lot better this week. He really got involved going forward, which is exactly what we wanted to see, and I thought some of his defensive efforts were great as well. The Pies forward line is full of AFL listed players, so he was often on a Josh Carmichael or an Ash Johnson, but he held his own, and that was a good test, seeing how he does against good forwards that he could be playing in the big time, and it's a big tick so far. But the fact we're talking about his defensive work and also highlighting the 19 disposals and a few rebound 50s, this was a good game. In fact, after this, I'm now most excited to see Lual in the next block of games, because I feel like he could really build confidence from it and get better. If he could start putting together 4-quarter performances, it would be great for us, because there were definitely one good half and one quieter half in this game, but I don't think it was an issue. Even when he was quiet, he was still solid down back, which is all you can ask for in a game like this against more dangerous forwards. Ken from Barbie was in the VFL for a week just to play against Collingwood while he returned from injury before being rushed back into the AFL side. I thought he was one of our better players against the Pies, especially late in the game. You often see guys come back from injury and tire a bit easier, but Guelfi, if anything, got better as the game went on, which is good. He kicked an important goal and had some really prominent pressure-based moments. His game awareness was also just levels above his opponents at times. It came as no surprise to see him back in the AFL after this game, and you saw that pressure and intensity at AFL level as well. I was quite openly disappointed with Jayden Davey in my last video, but this was a much more impressive game. He came out and responded. He must have watched my video, wanted to prove me wrong. Brad Scott or Carousella made him watch it on repeat before the game. He had a really good attack on the ball and his opponent all day. He does a lot of things that go unnoticed. He doesn't always get rewarded on the stat sheet. 1 goal, 8 touches. It looks like a quiet match, but you felt his impact much more than you did in previous weeks. I thought he was miles ahead of Caddy in particular in terms of genuine output this game, despite having just 1 less touch. And that's why you can't always trust stats. Carousella would have been very happy with this game. This is a player that only needs a few moments in a quarter, maybe with ball in hand or applying pressure, whatever it is. When he supplies those moments, you feel an energy lift around the team, and that is a valuable asset to have as a player. Archie Roberts was awesome yet again. He always is. He was again a pure winger, playing a bit closer to goals at times. He had plenty of the ball and threatened the scoreboard all day. He works so hard to find himself in dangerous positions in the forward line, and I love it because he pops up for space with no opponent through nothing but gut running. 22 touches, 2 goals, and 7 tackles. We talk about his ball use, but his attack and tenacity, I love it. He looks like he's going to be a pest, which is what you want. He is a good leader, as proven in his draft year, but also loves the challenge and will arc up on blokes bigger than him. You love to see it. It was as well-rounded game as you can see. 2 goals, 4 rebounds, 7 tackles. It's hard not to be happy with what we're seeing from Roberts. He's in really good form, and I hope it's rewarded with a debut soon. If Heppel needs a rest, or I guess Dersma's just injured himself, so it could be a time for Roberts to come in on that wing, because he deserves a chance. He's almost overdue, and he's played only 6 or 7 games. Vigo Visentini is having a fantastic start to the year. I don't know what's happened here. If anything, he's taking the spotlight away from Nate Caddy a bit. He was everywhere against Collingwood, competing in the air. He had 15 touches, 6 marks, kicked a nice goal. You feel him involved in the game even when he isn't, and that's a sign of a dangerous player. His height makes him impossible to defend forward at times, and his ruck craft is genuinely decent, even though we don't really get to see much of it because of Nick Bryan. And this has been the biggest surprise for me in 2024. Vigo Visentini, he's just looking a lot better than I thought he would. He doesn't flag either. He pushed through the game really well, and you felt like he was working really hard in every quarter. He's probably going to get a rest at some stage soon, which would be deserved. Actually, scratch that, we've just had a bye, so he probably won't get a rest. He'll probably come back firing next week. I'm keen to see what level he can finish up on in 2024, because right now he looks promising. And finally, Tex Wanganeen, he's still finding his feet coming back from that long-term injury. You can see that he isn't quite fit enough at times, which is expected. It's going to take time, and I think the bye probably came at a bad time for him as he just started playing full minutes again, but against the Pies, he didn't have much of an impact. Like with Davey, though, you feel a shift when he does something impactful. He just needs to find more of it, because he doesn't have that tenacious forward pressure that Davey does. He needs the ball to have an impact, needs to find more of of it and gain confidence, because if he had 15 to 20 touches, he would be a brilliant player for us in the reserves. He's a very technically skilled player. I just don't know if he has that AFL edge to his game. And that is that VFL recap done. Some great signs in the Rezzies. Hopefully the form continues while we see players return from injury. By the time I record the next video, we might actually have a handful of current AFL players back in the Rezzies, which should be fun. But that's all though. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and as always, go Bombers.